See, they played Thursday night football. They did not play this weekend, but we always want to know. We bring up Pro Football Focus. We talk about the grades. We were saying it didn't look like Myles Garrett did anything, and yet PFF has a good grade for him. Helping us break it down. I know he's on with G all the time in the barbershop. John Kosko from Pro Football Focus. John, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing excellent. We're happy to have you with us, and let's start with that. Myles Garrett, right? Like when there's not as many tradition, like with pass rushers, the only traditional stat is sack, but obviously that doesn't tell the whole story. He's getting double teamed, triple teamed. He didn't appear to be making a lot of impact, but the grade on him was pretty good. Give us a little breakdown of Myles Garrett and why he had a good grade, even though it didn't seem to the casual observer that he had a good game.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that obviously a sack is like 1% of the plays of a single season for a guy. So we look at every single play and we're grading the guy in every single play. So we take into consideration, is he getting double teamed, even triple teamed on plays, and what type of impact that makes. And then even in those situations, he can get pressure on the quarterback, but if the quarterback gets rid of the ball in 2 seconds, sometimes a sack doesn't happen. He had 3 pressures in the game. It wasn't like a super high game for him, but he did win 4 of the times where the quarterback got rid of it in, say, under 2 seconds, where it's really difficult to get pressure, especially from the edge in that situation. And so he won on his reps, 20% of his pass rushes. But the thing is that when Mitch Trubisky is actually throwing the ball in a quick manner, a lot of times, because the Browns secondary hasn't been playing actually all that great this year, it's difficult for him to get this consistent pressure that way. So, and he doesn't have any help right now on that defensive line. When Jadeveon Clowney's not out there, he's getting triple teamed almost half the plays.
Okay, now do Denzel Ward. He was singled up with Deontay the other night. Did not look like Denzel's played well the last couple of weeks. And I honestly haven't seen the numbers. I'm truly asking. I haven't seen what you guys have done with him. How has Denzel been both against the Steelers in the last 2 weeks?
I took a lot of flack on Twitter for his game against the Jets for giving up over 100 yards. He came out and called me out and said, "No, I only was targeted once."
I did see that.
A lot of cornerbacks think that, I was only in man coverage on a receiver once and was targeted, and that's it. And they don't think about situations like I was in the flat and they threw to the flat, so that's technically a target into his coverage. So he gave up, in our opinion, the big touchdown run to Corey Davis in that game. There was a busted coverage. It was cover 3 in our opinion there. And basically everybody else on the defense was playing cover 3 except for him. So he might think that he was in cloud 2, and that's probably what he thought he was, but he still let Corey Davis just run right by him. He has not been good so far this year. Even against Deontay Johnson, he struggled a lot in those comeback routes. He got injured this summer with that foot injury, and I think that's, that kind of really showed in this game because he struggled to cover him. He had a couple of nice plays on the ball, but he was generally getting beat pretty soundly from guy Deontay Johnson, which he's one of the best route runners in the NFL, but usually Ward is better than that.
John, we talked about this a little bit. I came out and I've been watching Jedric Wills, and in my mind, I done already moved him to guard. Like I don't think he's a starting left tackle. He's a top 10 pick, but I mean, when you look at him in the film, it just sometimes he leaves a lot to be desired. He's kind of a waist bender instead of a knee bender. What do the numbers bear out in terms of what Jedric Wills has been over his career with the Browns?
He's basically been below average to replacement level left tackle for the Browns. So when he's healthy, he's been decent the first 2 years, but you can have an excuse in the first 2 years of him moving from right tackle to left tackle, and that's a tough transition. But the problem I have with him is that he doesn't really finish plays, and he gives up on plays way too quickly. And it kind of shows when he's trying to cut off on the backside of outside zones. He might be pass protecting, and he goes, "I have a 3-second clock, and that ball should have been out in 3 seconds. I'm done." And he gets beat because of those types of situations. So I don't even know if moving him to guard would help in that situation, because you need to be a physically tough person to play inside. And he doesn't play with that physical toughness. He will have a play or two on tape in each game where he will finish a player, and it looks really impressive, but he doesn't do it on a consistent enough basis. He gets he just gets beat too often in a run game. He's pretty okay in pass protection, but the run game is where he really struggles, where he gets beat really quickly and then turns around and goes, hey, what happened? So, he's grading right now in the mid-50s, which is it's a liability. It's a liability.
So, John, before I get to my question, I see your Jayhawk fanatic sign behind you, so I'm sure that you're kind of ecstatic about what's going on there in Jayhawk country down there. I don't even know what's really happening down there. I like y'all really.
Jalen Daniels is what's happening down there.
Who even knew they played football?
He's an absolute stud.
I didn't even know that.
But I watched them this weekend. I'll give you that. I watched them this weekend. I said, okay, let me put an eye on this. Here's my thing. When you look at the Browns, John, I think the receiving core needs some shoring up here, right? And now, we got our top pick, David Bell from Purdue, right? I think what's your grading on the receivers beside Amari Cooper? Amari Cooper's been playing great. And Njoku's played well the last couple games. But what do you think about the rest of the receiving core here?
It's not good enough. They're grading in the 50s and 60s. And it's tough because they're not getting as many targets, but when you don't get targets, you don't get graded very well because it's kind of assumed when you're not getting targets, you're not getting open. And you're not earning the targets. Amari Cooper's playing obviously really well right now. Donovan Peoples-Jones had a really good week 1 game, but hasn't shown up at all since then. Part of that is scheme-wise, and they maybe made an emphasis to get to Amari Cooper the ball, and obviously David Njoku in this last game. But they're just not good enough, and I think we knew that coming into the season. I think a lot of people get hopes on Donovan Peoples-Jones because he does make some really nice contested catches, but he's not a good separator. In my opinion, he has pretty stiff hips and he can't really get in and out of his breaks real well. So he's a guy that when you throw him the ball, and if he's got a really large catch radius and is really good at those contested catches, but you can't live on contested catches if you can't get open on a consistent basis. And Amari Cooper can do that. These other guys don't do that. And even with Anthony Schwartz, he's a guy that is really stiff hips. We know he has straight line speed, but they I don't know if they utilize him in the proper way, because I wouldn't be using him on those reverses because you have to cut it upfield at some point, and he doesn't have the ability to do that on a clean and consistent basis. So they really miss Jakeem Grant when, obviously him getting hurt. Mm-hmm. I think he would have been more utilized in that role.
It's going to be interesting to see if that, you don't usually see a lot of big trades, but it'll be interesting, John, if the Browns, once we get to the trade deadline, if it looks like Brissett's going to be able to keep them in the hunt until Watson comes back, if they aggressively go after a second wide receiver. We've talked about free agents like Will Fuller, who is still out there, although he's got the history of Watson, obviously, but he's had a ton of injuries. But you look at some of the bad teams in the NFL, like maybe Brandon Cooks in Houston. I know he signed an extension. Are there some guys on bad teams that you've got your eye on that maybe the Browns could trade for at some point?
It's always I hate speculating on that type of stuff because, especially this early in the season, every team still has hope that they're going to make into the playoffs, right? Yeah. So I think with the Browns, they don't seem to be all that concerned with their wide receiver group. They obviously have Kareem Hunt, who they utilize in the passing game pretty well. And especially this year, they're finally utilizing him out in the slot and more out wide with Nick Chubb on the field, which has been a positive, sign there. I think they are starting to give up on Demetric Felton. He's been that punt returner, and I think he was an active scratch this past weekend. And I think, the Browns do need more receiver help, but I think if David Njoku kind of emerges as this number 2 weapon for them, it's kind of like what Kansas City would have had in not at that level. I'm not going to even compare it to the level that Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill were for Patrick Mahomes, but you can win a lot of football games with a tandem of a wide receiver and a tight end that are excellent. And Njoku, as the graphic shows there, had an excellent game. You don't even need the numbers to know that he had an excellent game in that one. Even with Amari Cooper's 2 drops in that game, he was still very effective. And I think it's can be good enough, that especially with the Browns running game. And it's with the way Jacoby Brissett has been playing, he's grading as a top 3 quarterback this year, which is kind of more an indictment on how bad the quarterbacks have been so far this year.
But we know that's not
really
last.
A consistent play.
We know that's not going to last. Yeah.
No, exactly. And I think he's playing about as well as you can hope for.
Yes.
And if he can maintain that for 11 games, it gets you into position when Deshaun Watson comes back that he's going to, he's going to have them in a position to make the playoff run. So I think, Brissett has been accurate, which is interesting. I was looking at this earlier today. He's been inaccurate on only like 17% of his throws over the past 3 years, which is a top 6 level in the NFL. And the difference, though, is Deshaun Watson's actually third best in that category. The difference, though, is that when he gets it to his target, it's not like a perfectly accurate ball. It's outside the frame that makes the receiver work for it, whereas like Deshaun Watson's at a top 5 level of always putting it on the frame. So if you want to talk about like Kevin Stefanski scheming up open receivers, and then also Jacoby Brissett has just been playing really well, I think you're just going to see this offense go to another level if Deshaun Watson can pick up where he's left off, obviously from 2020.
John, I want to ask you about Anthony Walker, but first, when you talk about grading these guys and deeming an inaccurate pass, I'm just curious how you determine that. How far off does it have to be for it to be considered inaccurate?
Not catchable. So, there's levels of that. So we have a lot of different categories where you'd say, hey, he puts it on his frame, he's leading him with perfect accuracy. Maybe he put it over his helmet, but it's in a catchable spot where you'd expect maybe the receiver to have to work a little bit more for it. Below the waist, you talk about is catchable, but it's low, so it's not like a perfectly accurate ball. But like essentially, if you're missing throws, it's inaccurate. I think for the most part, you can look at a quarterback and say, well, he missed that throw. There are some situations where it's like, hey, the receiver ran the wrong route and there's a miscommunication on it, and you're not sure. But that's like 1 to 2% of the throws that are out there that you're just not really sure on.
So as far as Walker goes, obviously it's a devastating injury for that defense. He's one of the leaders of that defense. How have the rest of the linebackers graded out, and who do you think emerges or who covers that hole now?
Well, I think Jacob Phillips is going to come in there. He had a really good game in place of Walker, coming in there. But the difference, though, between Walker and Phillips is that I think, Walker was actually playing well. I don't think he's not like a great linebacker by any means, but he's a good linebacker. He's a serviceable linebacker, and he was grading at a top 10 level so far this year, albeit on a small sample size. Last year he was in the middle of the pack of linebackers, and that's where I kind of expect him to be. Jacob Phillips, on the other hand, in his time with the Browns in the NFL, has been a bottom quarter of the league linebacker, and that's on a small sample size. He really hasn't shown very well. I think we all know what Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah can do. He's one of the best linebackers already in the NFL, and he showed that so far this year. And I think he needs to step up his game even more without Walker, because I still don't trust Phillips, even though he's an athletic guy and he can run around, but he's not the leader that you need for that defense, especially with all the busted coverages that they've had and the miscues in zone coverages. So it's a loss for sure from a leadership standpoint and a standpoint of he was the communicator out there. Even if the communication wasn't great so far this year, I can't imagine what it's going to be like now.
John, there's two, I guess, glaring positions for me. One is the defensive tackle room, and I've been talking about this for, I don't know, probably 6 months. I know they like Jordan Elliott. I know they got Brian, but I just watched the tape, and they were getting, especially Taven Bryan. I mean, he was getting destroyed up front. And then the position group that I thought was going to be really a strength of this team in terms of John Johnson III and Grant Delpit, I have not seen. I just haven't seen the flashes from those two guys at a high enough level where the defense needs to go if they want to be elite.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all know that defensive tackle is an issue. There was an issue last year where they just continually got pushed around, especially if teams want to just run it down their throats, they can. And they made obviously some changes there, but they don't prioritize the position, and I think that's pretty clear. And I think a lot of people have hope that maybe they'll sign in Ndamukong Suh at some point. I just don't see them doing it because they just don't prioritize the position. We just haven't seen them even have an ounce of interest in doing so. I think they want them to be serviceable enough, but they just aren't. They grade as a bottom 5 unit in the NFL, if not the worst. So they have issues here. The secondary, I think, is going to be fine. When you talk about what's happened in the first 3 weeks of the season, it's a lot of busted coverages, which, it tanks a grade pretty badly, and obviously looks really bad. I think miscommunications and busts happen a lot more often than people realize in the NFL. And it's not like, and good quarterbacks are not even good quarterbacks, but quarterbacks will take advantage of it. And the Browns have just had them at like inopportune times. So I think they're going to be fine. I'm not a believer in Grant Delpit. I've never have been. He's a guy that does kind of play out of place quite often. Even did it in LSU. He got away with it because he was a good enough athlete there. But you can't do that at the NFL level. You're not Troy Polamalu who can anticipate and play at a high level, with even being out of position. So they need to be just more sound on the back end. I think John Johnson's been actually okay this year, but he's not the vocal leader that the team needs on that back end, which I kind of thought he would have been this year. Or I mean, when they signed him to even last year and this year, but he's not. So he's more of like a media in the locker room type guy, but on the field he's not a great communicator. It doesn't seem like, and that's kind of where some of these busts happen. Is this the lack of communication in that back end.
John, good stuff. Your picture they just showed there looked like you were being arrested there. I mean, or maybe.
That was a picture I took last November. So there's like mustache November. November month. So
that looks like someone driving home from the January 6th event. But
Hey, what are you doing?
Sorry.
What is wrong with you?
Goodness.
I'm making a joke.
Actually,
If we can't laugh at the depressing things in the country, what do we got?
People have made fun of that picture before, and they'll make fun of whatever. So I laugh with it.
Hey man, own it. You look terrifying in it.
You look dangerous.
I wouldn't mess with it.
Good.
Hey, John.
Don't listen to this idiot.
John, just FYI, you watch out for Adrian Martinez, okay?
All right. Well, I'm not too scared about Kansas State. They lost to Tulane, but then they did beat.
That's the Sooners said Saturday.
So.
Let's be honest. All these games are irrelevant anyway because Kansas is not playing for a national title. So no offense.
No, but they're going to be playing for a bowl game this year, and that's a huge deal.
That's a huge step up.
You want to call his kids ugly next? Like, you told him he should have looked like he's coming over January 6th. Hey, you told him his college team has no hope. John, don't ever come back. Don't ever come back.
Thanks, John. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys.
We'll see you later.
Thank you.
All right, we.